To dig into all of that, we're joined by columnist at The National, Shona Craven, editor of The Big Issue, Paul McNamee, and the Conservative activist, Jess Insall.
Well, to discuss this, we are joined by columnist at The National, Shona Craven, editor of The Big Issue, Paul McNamee, and Conservative activist, Jess Insall.
Well, Shona, whether we're talking about ministers or officials, should they have realised that they should have held on to these messages?
Well, we don't know what this content is. Maybe it's not that sensational, but potentially telling people to delete it obviously makes people quite suspicious as to what was being discussed.
There's a lot of really cool stuff that's come out, and we don't just say, OK, you can never use WhatsApp.
Of the inquiry, obviously, we've seen some of the messages from some of the bigger names in the Westminster government.
That it is a much more conversational space than other formal communications. But I think
things that are a bit indiscreet, as Paul says, maybe that's kind of all it is, some indiscreet comments, and then someone's decided, actually, there's too many indiscreet comments, let's delete it all, which would look much worse than maybe just a few slightly embarrassing things coming out.
OK, leave it there.
Hasn't she? But I think she probably fears she won't get in again. I think, while yes, Holmes could have been a little more elegant in his goodbye to her. That.
I just got that hint over the weeks. But would you say that he...
Most of the challenges in terms of inflation, in terms of the cost of living crisis, in terms of global conflict, these are and I do think that, I don't think he'll win the next election. I'm a realist. I think you can look at the polls and you say it's probably not going to happen. And I think actually a large part of it is actually for a lot of these children and young people.
I think a lot of it is just people have got into bad habits.
I think important impact on young people in their own health. We have the health of the people that they live with. And I personally, a bit controversially, don't actually think we should have young carers. I don't think young people should be responsible for caring for other people at home. Their responsibility is to go to school, is to socialise, is to play and have fun. And so I think if there's more problems at home linked to poverty, linked to ill health and health inequalities, those shouldn't be impacting on young people. So yes, some young people might be taking advantage and saying, I can't be bothered or I'm out of the habit. But actually we need to ask if actually some of the adults in the house are actually encouraging the children to stay at home, to stay off, and say, oh, you can probably do the online learning instead. Well, they probably can't, because it's not the same experience at all as they would have had in COVID, and there's no substitute for being in a classroom, being taught, being able to ask questions, being able to learn with a group of people. So I would worry about that, and I'd worry about the inequalities that are under these top-line figures.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. Well, this is 7 Days with Hope Webb and Graham Stewart. We are talking through all the week's news with our expert panel of guests.
Had addiction issues, and people who have addiction issues know how crippling they can.
Actually, if men have more access to paternity leave, they have more involvement raising their children, that's good for
a full workshop. And people could bring friends round as well, have woodwork parties too. I'd love it.
Love that.
Don't need £1 million, to be honest, just a few hundred if anyone wants to donate to a project.
Paul, do you think? Thank you, of course, to our panel, Shona Craven, Paul McNamee and Jess Insall.
And don't forget, you can find the programme on your TV and radio, and you can catch up on the iPlayer and the Sounds app. But
Bye-bye
from here,
for now.
it's goodbye.
Bye-bye.